All right, well, we're getting situated. Take a look at mempool.space. Looks like we're about 6 blocks deep in the mempool. Um, Last block had transactions ranging from 2 to 228 sats per vbyte. Next one's up. It's rising. I think some people's alarms have been set off. When I was just looking at it when it started at 2, but now the minimum fee is 10 sats per vbyte to 4.99. The low fee is 8 sats per vbyte. Medium's 14, high is 25. Difficulty adjustment is going downward still. That's minus 9.61 currently. Oh, we just had our block go in, and some of those 2 sat per vbytes got in. That's good to see. Might be a real nice time to open some channels, folks. I know I did a lot this week. Oh,
Hey, doing great. How are
looks
you?
like we got Keegan. Keegan from Start 9. Invite him on. Oh, where Justifer's at. Maybe he can't join, but
I made it.
so, oh, there he is. How you doing, Justifer?
Hey, doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been a really busy week. I feel like I've had more meetings than I did programming, but that's okay. Uh, Pretty happy with where things are going on a lot of different projects, so that's fun. And yeah, it was a really good week in terms of opening channels and managing channels and whatnot because of the low fees. I don't know if you were hearing, but I was going through the mempool stats right now and checking things out. Um, but yeah, just for hope you're well. Unfortunately, all we won't have Chaz joining us today. He's taking the week off. But Christopher and I will take the reins, and we can't replicate Chaz, but we're gonna do our best to pick up the slack. We've got a bit more structure than usual this week. We've got a bit of a list of topics we're gonna
Sure,
try
yeah,
to
I just
cover.
put the stream URL out.
Yeah, one of them was
Along with
that
the
downward difficulty I just
Twitter Spaces
mentioned.
isn't for
Um,
them.
Just for you want to talk about that, Ant?
But yeah, the Sure, yeah, I was just getting the stream URL out so people can follow along on YouTube if Twitter Spaces isn't working for them. But yeah, the downward difficulty adjustment. I didn't really expect it to keep on dropping as our hash rate goes. Because yeah, that next difficulty adjustment is down another nearly 10% when I checked it earlier today. So yeah, it's like I'm just waiting on whether these miners are going to start plugging in again soon, or how much work they have to set up a new mining infrastructure like all tracks and such. Um, but
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we underestimated what kind of lift this would take. And I think that, if this is the real deal, right? Obviously, China, might still have some cronyism going on and mining privately or whatever, but it seems like a whole bunch of miners are actually relocating, and we're seeing a great exodus of these miners from the east to the west. And this is, I think, the significance of this event is going to be quite understated when we're looking back at it. Lots of reasons to be bullish on this, and in terms of mining decentralization, in terms of this great authoritarian power in China, sort of losing some degree of their grasp of Bitcoin. It's a really crazy event. But
it sounds like Denver is or Adam is ready to talk about that if you want to bring him
oh
up on.
yeah, sure thing. I see his request. I'll add him up. I'll bring him on stage. What is going on, Adam O? How are you today?
Sometimes it takes a second for Twitter Spaces, but yeah, take it away, Adam.
No, yeah, I was just gonna chime in on the miners finding. I think I think what we're gonna see for at least the next little while is guys scrambling to find power for these miners, right? I know currently I know some guys that have, they're getting thousands of new gen miners in per month for the next 6 months, and they have no home for them. So guys are scrambling to find power. I mean, I think that's one thing that oftentimes is overlooked, or at least not calculated when people try to project future hash rate, is the sheer amount of electrical power that's going to need to be continuously running in order to justify, or even in order to support that hash rate. I think it's about 40 to 50 continuous megawatts of power per exahash. Obviously, depending upon what ASICs you're using, it can vary, but it's around there. And that's it's not easy to find 50 megawatts of power. So we might see, a nice crash in ASIC prices if Bitcoin doesn't, pump and go north. We might see a flood in the market and a bunch of cheap hardware to scoop up. That being said, it won't be attractive at the time, but for people who are looking, a year down the road.
Yeah, I mean, if you got the capacity, right? Yeah, that was going to be my question. Like, do you think, these miners are going to be like offloading hardware if they can't use them?
Yeah, I mean
it seems to me like they will, right? I mean, if they can't find a solution in the next couple of weeks, I know they're going to give themselves a little bit of padding to find something to accommodate them, but those margins get thin, right? When with these equations, these sort of balances that these miners are running.
Well,
right?
But that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head right there. The margin is I think what's going to dictate what happens, right? Because if Bitcoin stays, $30,000 or even goes lower, then I agree with you. Yes, like at some point, if these miners can't find a home for all their hardware, they'll probably dump them to the market, right? But if we see Bitcoin go north, if we see price pump, I think what we'll find is guys will get really creative and work deals, right? Because if you have all this hardware, and it's like you need to find a home for it. If the price goes north, you're willing to give up a higher percentage, or a higher share of maybe revenue, or pay a higher price for electricity to come online. And so then they can justify working a deal. But right now, because the margins are kind of tight and guys are scrambling, some guys are kind of just sitting still and at a force point in the conversation where nobody wants to bend, right? They want a better price, but nobody wants to give it to them. So
do you know what the do you know what the price per hash what the break even price of electricity is right now?
On an S9, I think it's right around 8 cents. On the newer stuff, it's higher. I think it's right around 20 something cents. I actually was about to check. Let's see. Actually, no, S9. Shit, S9's profitable up to about 12.5 cents right now. And newer stuff is going up, I think, above 30 cents. 35
Yeah,
cents.
I thought I was seeing recently, after this last difficulty adjustment, once it kind of evens out, they know what it is, that an S9 might be profitable all the way up to close to 20 cents.
Nah, right now it's looking like break even's right around 13 or so. But after this next one, you're right. We might be above 15 cents again.
And you're talking, you can pick up the S9s for $300 right now. So that's good too.
Yeah. Not a lot of people are selling them for $300 because they're so great to plug in. Freaking the new stuff though, is to 35 cents. So yeah, they're earning 35 cents. I mean, this might be the most profitable time to mine Bitcoin, in history, other than maybe the first year or something. It's this most recent difficulty adjustment downward. I mean, the S19s and the new gen hardware, because of this thing with China, the prices of hardware have gone down, but their profitability has gone up. It's a bizarre market right now.
Oh, apologies. I swear, Spaces has the worst UI, and I end up muting everyone at least once per Lightning Friday session. So sorry about that, folks. You should be able to unmute yourself if you want to speak. But yeah, I just want to say, yeah, this is going to be an incredible opportunity for someone who might want to, dip their toes into the market, into some home mining. Obviously, you got to make some considerations about, whether you have, the available power to use, and you could accommodate for the heat in the summer. And what I think the most annoying factor is the noise. But this could prove to be like a great thing for mining decentralization, not just from bringing things from the east to the west, but for individual Bitcoiners to try to take things into their own hands.
So
I kind of want to talk about the thing that no one wants to talk about, which is that hash rate is more than 50% off of all-time high right now, which means that latent ASIC hash power actually, in theory, outnumbers the hash power that's online. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Nah, I mean, it's again, but like the amount of electricity for like a 51% attack or something right now is nuts. I mean, like you'd have to be in control of gigawatts of electricity, a
Sure,
single
but
entity. So I mean, I don't know.
Well, let me paint a different picture here, right? It's like if people are offloading these pieces of hardware for very, very, very cheap, you could presume like how the hardware changes hands offline. I think really meaningfully can change some of the dynamics here. Let me also be clear about my own position. I'm not saying that this is for sure a problem, but I think it's a chink in the armor, right? And it doesn't mean that it's exploiting it is easy, and it doesn't mean that like is anywhere remotely near probable. But I like it does exist.
No, that's fair. But this is what I would say is that like so say the entire network hash rate. I mean the nominal amount of computational power matters. So if the entire network was just 100 terahashes, and then we dropped to like 40 terahashes, right? Then I would agree with you more, right? It's like, yeah, it's a bigger chink in the armor. But like as the nominal hash rate gets to where we are at now, like we're in the double digit exahashes per second. I mean the sheer the sheer power somebody would have to be able to attack the network, it's still pretty unfeasible, or it's just, yeah, it's like really very unlikely, I would say.
Isn't there a dynamic going on right now though that, okay, so hash rate's down, miners are dirt cheap. It's actually decentralizing miner ownership, because you got people that would have never thought about picking up one or two new gen ASICs because they were double the price of what they are now, and they're like, okay, well maybe I'll try to make it work.
Entirely.
So
yeah,
you're taking that big lot of miners that's coming in from one miner organization, and it's just getting split up and decentralized to everyone. But then so also as those miners go out to the market and hash rate climbs, then the price is going to go up. The price of hardware is going to go up too, because there's fewer and fewer of those miners left on the market. So I think when you see the hash rate turn around, that's the floor on the mining market, because there's no more. Everything will be offline. Anything that was going offline will be offline at that point, I would assume.
No, that's a good point. Real quick though, Neil, did you just see Slush Pool just found back-to-back blocks in the last 2 minutes while you were talking?
Bang 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 bang. We've just been nailing it, and it's kind of depressing to me right now because of the way my operation's going on. I have like a petahash offline right now.
Oh, that hurts.
I mean, I have enough. I have enough online that I'm not crying myself to sleep or anything like that, but it's nonetheless, it's painful.
So in terms of the Lightning Network, a lot of what we're concerned about is, how are the mempool dynamics affected? So how would you expect the hash rate to grow as these miners that are latent, as you said, are coming back online? What would you expect it to come in like big hash rate jumps in the future, or would you expect, depending on price action, for these miners to change hands once more and it be a slower growth in hash rate?
No, I think it'll come on like big blocks.
You think so?
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of like to your point earlier though, the power. The available power is what's gonna. I think there'll be big blocks, definitely, but then I think you'll see a a steady growth rather than big jumps. Because like you said, the power just might not be available in these places. Like maybe a
That's fair.
couple. Yeah,
I mean, for
and
an
then like maybe a
exahash-
couple big jumps.
For an exahash to come online, like I said, yeah, like, you know, we're talking about 40, 50 megawatts of continuous power, right? To see even just a 10% jump, where are we at now? Like 80 something exahashes or something. I don't even know, maybe lower. So like I think it's likely there'll be some big jumps, but I think price will drag it up really fast. If we see any kind of bull run in price in the next, you know, 90, 120 days, I think hash rate will follow quite quickly. If it doesn't, I'll jump up and down and celebrate, because that's just like amazing. I just can't believe it's this good right now. That's almost where I'm sitting. Like it defies what I expected by a lot.
Yeah, it was speculation. When I was buying up miners over the last few months, I was just speculating on price going up and all that, and then it just gets handed to you. It's just like, oh, here you go. No, you are
Exactly.
actually going to be definitely a profitable business.
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. It's like, then it's like, oh crap. Well, the only issue there is, well, how long do I wait before I buy more hardware?
I don't think you do it. I don't think
That's
you
what I was
time
gonna
it.
say. What's the timing?
It's just like Bitcoin. How long do you wait before, if you're sitting on 10 grand that you won in Bitcoin, how long are you going to wait at $30,000 before you put your money in?
It's different in Bitcoin that way, because it's heading toward commoditization, right? And so, like, I mean, I don't holding on to an S7 doesn't get you what holding on to Bitcoin did. You know, like, so I think there is still a timing factor that is much more critical. Ultimately, as long as if you've got really economic power, that's why I always recommend to people, like, if you're going to actually mine, like, make sure to find economic power, because then the rest of the variables that could screw you up really don't matter. As if you've got like dirt cheap power, you could have horrible timing, you could even overpay for your ASIC a little bit, and you're probably still in really good shape. It's the other way that people get caught. They think because they're gonna get all these deals on maybe on the ASIC hardware or whatever, or their timing is gonna be perfect, or their financing is gonna be really good, even though their power is expensive, they're gonna be fine. Like, that's usually where you can get into trouble.
Yeah, 100%. I was just looking at, like, because I mean, like, the S19s right now, like around 100 terahash, like, you know, they dropped from around 10K to about 8K ish right now, so they're kind of on sale. So, but you know, I'm also looking at one, and I'm like, you know, if who knows if it's gonna plummet a little more, or if this is a really good time. So
yeah, I mean,
but you also have the main suppliers. I forget what. So apparently, Antminer is still producing, or Bitmain's still producing, but they're not selling to the market. And then you have MicroBT that has completely stopped production until at least September. So if this glut on the market evaporates, then you're working in the other direction. Then you're going to have a shortage, and the prices are going to go.
You're absolutely right. You could
100%.
You could flip like a 15-20x return if you time that right. But no, I'll say even the S19s might even be cheaper than what was said earlier at $8,000. I mean, at Upstream Data, we're able to procure S19s, and I mean, I can get them cheaper than that. We have a minimum order quantity.
I just personally bought M31 S pluses, which are 85 terahash. I was just personally buying those for $5,000 a piece, and they were 11 or 12,000 3 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the S19s are around like 6,500, $7,000 where we're at. So it's like,
yeah,
you know, I think, which is still, by the way, inflated to some degree. I mean, it's because of how lucrative it is out there to mine. I mean, S9s were going at less than $10 a terahash. I remember telling myself I'd never pay more than $15 a terahash for an S9. I mean,
people were giving me S9s for free, and I was buying M32s for $1,500 last July.
My point is, I think it can go a lot lower.
Oh yeah,
like,
I hear
like we could see a lot more dump on the hardware costs, because like it's come down a lot, but it got up really high. So we haven't come down nearly where we were, you know, November time.
I agree. And we don't know how much of that supply is in transit. We don't know how much has been purchased and not just plugged in. Like, we don't know what's actually on the market, and we don't know what power is available places. I mean, there may be a privately owned power plant, decommissioned power plant somewhere that they just decided to turn it off, and some miner goes to them, and you have 500 megawatts or something absurd, just that they have availability to. So I mean, you don't know. There's so many variables. It's hard to. I just do the same thing I do with Bitcoin. Buy the dip. You see a dip, you buy the dip. You can't.
I can't believe you buy hardware dips like you buy Bitcoin dips. It's so awesome. I mean, it's.
Well, I mean, I don't know what else to do because then I beat myself up about like, all right, I should have. It was $10,000 last week. It's $12,000 this week, and I'm beating myself up about it. Or I buy one at 7,000, and then the same model drops to 5,000, and I'm beating myself up about that. No, you just buy the dip.
Dude, that's funny. I mean, I always look at it like I don't like to hold a lot of hardware that I can't, plug in because
you can't deploy it. Yeah. That's like I was saying, that's when it starts becoming stressful, but that also motivates you to go start looking at leasing out an old Subway or buying a pizza joint or something like that. Like options start presenting themselves to you, and start looking at things differently. We got a little off track,
I think. So we were was the question toward the mempool and
yeah, I think the.
So I guess from what I gathered from what you were talking about, the slowest increase in hash rate might happen if the price dips, because that's when we might experience a changing of hands.
That's what I would say. Yeah, as if we see a prolonged lower price, then yeah, we could see a really gradual recovery.
But I definitely agree with that. But wouldn't it have to be pretty deep dip though? Because like with the mining profitability right now, people are going to leave their rigs on where they would have been shutting them off before. So you have that whole cohort of people that were like just squeaking by at $60,000 Bitcoin, and now they're at 30,000, and they were maybe thinking about shutting off, and now bang, they're like super deep in the money again.
Well, that's why I was asking about what the profitability in terms of the what power costs you would have to get in order to break even, because I think that Adam was saying, like, if it's 12 cents, like I know here in Denver, we get like consumer electricity is like just south of 12 cents, which means that if you're getting any sort of like wholesale deals on power, like you're going to be able to maintain profitability even with the S9s. So like that means that, yeah.
But you see a run up to 60 grand. Now all of a sudden your break even is 24 cents. Because you're still mining the same amount of Bitcoin at this hash rate, but it's the dollar Bitcoin conversion. Like the price. So when the price goes up, I think more rigs stay online or come online, I guess. Even no, everything should be online.
No, but see that's the.
You have a miner, it better be plugged in.
That's why I think the price matters, right? Is because if you're sitting there thinking if price is going to sit around 30s or it's going to dip for the next little while, like the existing miners, yes, they might be looking to expand. New miners might be looking to come on, true, but that margin is going to get squeezed really quickly as new competition comes online, right? So that might only bring us to 100 plus exahashes. But it's when we see price increase that the current miners will be really incentivized to expand their current operations, right? To add more hash rate to their current operations, because the opportunity to go out there and grow your hash rate, you're rewarded more as the price goes up, right? Whereas if you add more hash rate currently, it's like, right, it's diminishing rewards. And so during that price increase, guys love to expand their operation and get miners. But if the price is dipping or staying flat, then I don't know if they're going to take as much risk. So it's all going to depend on that. That being said, there's so much hardware coming to North America that has no home. Like I said, I mean, I know multiple guys that have thousands of machines coming per month, and they don't have a home for them yet. So like they're scrambling, and we'll see how it turns out. They can find deals.
To steer some of the conversation back towards like some of the Lightning and the mempool stuff, I do actually have a question for you guys that actually do this for a living. A lot of people speculate about the sort of long-term miner incentives, and people kind of like, people talk with varying levels of alarm about like long-term mining incentives. And my question to you guys is actually like, so let's say that the block reward itself was dwarfed by whatever the transaction fees were, and you're looking at basically empty mempools right now, even when the hash rate is down. My question to you guys is like, how do you go about I'm assuming you guys are in this kind of for the long term, and so like how would you go about trying to like reason about what to do in those situations? Because I'd imagine you're not just going to be like, yeah, run them indefinitely. You're going to, you know, strategically turn them on and off, and, you know, depending on what the mempool fees are and whether it's attractive to you or not.
So it's a block subsidy compared to transactions fees question. And then so the only thing you can really do is forecast out 10 years, right? Like, so in 2010, when the iPhone came out, nobody envisioned a world that we're living in now in 2021, where everything is done on people's phones. Like, sure, it was a cool gimmicky little internet access thing, but like nobody could have predicted what 10 years in the future was going to look like. So to do any type of thought experiment on what the Lightning Network is going to look like in 10 years is kind of, I don't know how worthwhile it is, but what you do know is what the block subsidy will be. So you just work your calculations off that, you know, and this is the way I personally do it. And transaction fees are just the cherry on top.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a kind of a fun thought experiment to think about what the network and what the mining industry is going to look like when transaction fees are a majority of the block subsidy. I think will we start to try to tailor our mining uptime around high transaction volume? I don't think so. I mean, we're also talking about Bitcoin in, you know, like 20 years, maybe beyond that. I think it's going to take another
I don't know, 12
12
years gets us to 12 years gets us to like at earlier fee prices, like earlier this year when we had like not cleared the mempool for 6 months or whatever. The average fee percentage of the total block reward was something around 15%, which means
right.
what, three halvings gets us to 50-50 split, in which case I would consider, you know, the fees to be a material part of the strategy that anybody's employing. So
yeah, you know, see what's interesting about
it's closer than we all think.
But what's interesting about that is kind of what Neil said, and like even the way I think about it, and I think the way it has been in history is that as a miner, the block subsidy, like the actual, you know, the new Bitcoin that gets released, is really what you calculate off. You don't even factor in fees are like just this sweet bonus almost. Now you're you know, I understand like when it becomes a larger percentage, will that be factored in to that degree? I suppose it will, but it's still going to be an average, right? Because like the way I look at the earnings today is I usually kind of calculate like 1,000 Bitcoin a day, right? In terms of what's rewarded to all miners, and sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but like the times of high fees aren't, I guess, they're not all that material yet. So that's interesting. I mean, I wonder if Bitcoin's price will make it such that the Bitcoin subsidy, the new Bitcoin, is going to be sufficient enough. But yeah, no, that's interesting.
Well, the reason I ask is because now you start to get into these situations where it might actually be attractive to, like, for if the block subsidy is low, and there are some really juicy fee transactions in the last block or 2 blocks ago, it sometimes can be attractive for your own hash power to try to go do some shallow reorgs. And the thing is that all of this then affects the actual underlying security of the Lightning Network itself. I think right now LND uses 3 confirmations by default, and so we've never really had 3 block reorgs in Bitcoin right now, and that's just because the block subsidy it's like it is so attractive to just mine and, like, you know, sprint full speed ahead to try to get to the next block. But when the fee, when the mempools are empty, or like when the aggregate fees that are in the mempool right now are dwarfed by maybe some of the fees that are in recent history, you can get these sort of reorg situations. And, you know, we can all try to speculate on what you would do, like, but I think, you know, as miners, you might have a little bit more insight into how you think about these problems.
So let me see if I got your question straight here. So you're thinking that when the fees are more substantial, like let's say call it the majority of the block reward, then you're afraid that there won't be enough network hash rate to protect against a big player who can do a reorg. Is that what you're asking?
I think all individual miners are then like, let's say that
I think you're saying like they're
Mempool is
incentivized, right? They might have an incentivization to go back and try to do a reorg because of the fact that maybe the previous block had some big transactions, some big fees, right? And so it's like,
yeah, and you didn't mine it, right?
Yeah, I mean that's like, I think that's the incentive is possibly there, but like that's in the same way,
it's
you know,
feasible, but it's not plausible, I don't think.
Well, and I don't really know if that incentive would get tracked, right? Like I don't think that the guys who are actually facilitating the mining are gonna, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like a worthwhile effort, right? Like, I mean,
No,
I guess you have to see the numbers, right? If it ends up being really, you know, change in economics, then maybe, but it seems to me like it would fall through the cracks a little bit, right? It wouldn't be front and center of their operations to look at reorgs.
And I don't know.
I mean, my question is like, if you're sitting on a bunch of hardware, right, and you are basically faced with the choice of like, okay, do I mine this at a loss, or do I try to do recent history reorgs? Like, it's not actually clear whether you might try to do it. I mean, I guess it also requires a certain level of like software competency, because generally speaking, intentionally doing reorgs is not generally built into things like Core
right. That's
now.
kind of what I'm thinking.
But
like yeah, like you'd have to develop for that strategy.
But like, we even just saw like a Time Bandit release of something. I think so. I don't know how many of you are following the nonsense that's going on with the miner extracted value in Ethereum, but someone just released like an open source client that adapted. I think it was Geth or something like that, to intentionally start doing some of these miner extracted value attacks. And like, once you open source that, like, you know, you can get your hands on it and whatnot.
I don't think we're gonna, like, you can't really predict what the financialization of the mining industry is going to look like by then. Like, I mean, just for the first time ever, I just heard that somebody I know got $1 million collateralized loan against their miners. The miners were the collateral, and they got an actual loan for $1 million. And it's like, I don't know how much that's happening in the moment.
Mind-blowing, especially considering the volatility of hardware, and
that's
the fact
that
that people can't even get this shit insured yet. Somebody found a collateral.
Yep, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's unheard of. It would be so interesting to hear the details of that deal.
Number.
Yeah, I know, and that happened last week. I heard about that, and it blew my fucking mind. And then so it's like, you're trying to look 10 years down the road, like you're gonna have no idea, like those big operations that maybe have the power to do any type of reorging of any type whatsoever. I mean, they're going to have built into contracts that they have to work on in the best interests of these. Because if you can use a miner as collateral, that bank is going to tell you, hey, listen here, you're signing this contract that says you play by the rules because you're working with our money now, and we want our money and we want it on time. And no funny business. This is what you do with those miners.
One of the arguments against attacking the Bitcoin network is that these miners are sitting on massive amounts of hardware that their value, like if Bitcoin as a system becomes non-valuable because it is insecure because of miner funny business, then presumably the hardware that they're sitting on becomes significantly devalued. Which, if you can devalue the collateral that you are on that you have on the loan, that loan almost acts as a hedge or a way to neutralize your position, so you're no longer long the Bitcoin network, yet you still retain the power to attack it.
Exactly.
I'm actually very worried about derivatives markets and how it actually affects the ability for people who are ostensibly supposed to be aligned with the value of the Bitcoin network as a whole, to somehow neutralize their position and still retain the firepower.
Yeah, and there's probably very few loans issued out right now. Very few people right now that came up with the full capital for their operation. There's loans involved in that, and they were undoubtedly asked, "What is the money for?" And they have to answer. And then when banks get a little bit wiser about where their money's going, they're going to start building all of that into the contracts. Like you can't, don't screw around.
It's just going to some computers. That's all.
Yeah,
Buying a
like
couple of computer chips and
like I've been telling the power companies, data servers, don't worry about it. They're just servers serving racks.
Yeah, just running a couple servers. That's all.
You know,
it is interesting. I'm sorry. I was gonna say real quick. One question I had about the Lightning Network, because I've got some geniuses in the room in that regard. Is do we expect a Lightning Network that has so much traffic that the actual layer one mempool of Bitcoin is going to be like crowded with Lightning transactions being settled?
Here's a fun
channels getting
statistic.
closed and opened, or what?
Here's a fun statistic about that, is that if every person in America, every individual in America wanted to open a Lightning channel, it would take 3 years to get through all of them.
Yes.
If we had full blocks at all times, right?
Well, right, and if the hash rate didn't grow at all.
No. Sorry. If there was if there was a somewhat, as long as the hash rate on average was stable, right?
Yes.
You could, but again, like even with the hash rate growth that we've seen, just because like if you're going 10% faster, you'll be able to make those transactions go through about 10% faster, right?
Do we have metrics on? I mean, I know they're out there, but does anyone actually know the numbers on what percentage of transactions right now are Lightning open closes or compared to just regular peer-to-peer?
Can we identify that? Is that transparent?
Interesting.
We could probably figure out which ones are closes. The opens are a little bit harder.
Yeah, exactly. And that's only in the meantime. Once we get Taproot activated, we're not even going to be able to tell what those closes are really.
Well, somebody better get on that right now, so I have a rough estimate as of what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you asked that question, Adam, because Keegan made a really interesting analogy, and I kind of want to take it a little bit further because you were talking about like the iPhone, and I was just sort of imagining like how many messages can like a computer process as like these computers are like developing. So like an early computer might fill up an entire container, but now as the technology is improving, we've basically filled that same container with a whole bunch of iPhones, each capable of sending their own messages, and we wouldn't necessarily know what all was going on. It's just too difficult and now too private to actually get a good estimate of how many transactions are going on. So this is exponential growth, and we're also witnessing exponential growth of Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. Just this week, I think we reached 1,700 Bitcoin that is in channels in the Lightning Network. So
we added 20% capacity in the last month.
That's huge. You know, one thing want to mention in terms of the incentive aspect of kind of we talked earlier about the block subsidy, and I think this relates to transactions and to the mempool in the sense of as transaction fees become a larger percentage of block subsidy, miners will definitely be more incentivized to increase their hash rate in moments of, at times of like mempool chaos and traffic, right? If there's all of a sudden a whole bunch of fees sitting there on the horizon that maybe after a time where fees were kind of slim, block rewards all of a sudden increase, well, profitability is going to increase. That's almost just like it's almost like competition coming offline. And so
that would almost be like incentivized. It wouldn't be hash rate manipulation because that's not what they're trying to do. But that's what would happen is, okay, so you have a hash rate epoch where fees are low, but that's the majority of the reward. Nobody's going to be mining, and then fees go high. Everybody kicked on, but it was right after a difficulty adjustment. Yeah, I could see that being
no,
weird.
but see, and this is what I think would kind of be the tact there is you would have a mining operation, right? You'd have, let's say you have, an exahash or something massive. But then you'd have maybe, 100 petahashes sitting idle and then you'd flip those on, and like just add to your costs, add to your electrical consumption, and maybe it even brings you to a point where like it brings you a less profitable place. But because of the fact that there's all these fees on the horizon, you flip those on because you want to definitely, be involved in those blocks. And so I don't know, it would be necessarily manipulation, but it's kind of back to Keegan's point of, I think it might actually begin to play a tactful role in a miner strategy.
Yeah,
Okay,
and so
you're talking about network or machines online compared to mempool congestion.
Exactly.
Yep. And so one of the other interesting consequences of that is I think we are going to stop measuring how secure and how immutable certain transactions are in terms of confirmations. I think right now we all think about things as like, oh, this thing is 3 blocks deep, we're good to go. And in a world where the block subsidy is dominating the reward schedule, that is a useful approximation. But what's interesting is that we'll end up having, I think, 2 measurements of whether or not these things are secure. Number one is how many downstream fees have been mined on top of this thing, right? Like the security of old transactions becomes a function of the fees paid later, as well as the amount of like joules spent burying these transactions in history.
And so you're telling me that the fee value will become a measure of security, because if fee value of a block is enticing enough, it needs to be buried deeply so that it can't be possibly,
I think
reordered.
what I thought he was saying was the higher the fees in a block, the more hash rate was hitting it because they wanted that block. And then so therefore it's going to take more hash rate to reorg that block because you have to prove work done. So you actually have to go back and rehash that whole block if you're going to reorg it, but you have to expend the same amount of work that was spent on that block, correct?
Yeah, that's roughly speaking. I don't actually have 100% clear thoughts on this right now, but I've been thinking a lot about how the security of the sort of post-subsidy world works, and rather than sort of approaching it from the Bitcoin's fucked and this is a miner death spiral, I've been trying to just see what the second, third, and fourth order effects are. But what I end up thinking happens is that a lot of the Lightning implementations have to change how they measure whether a channel is considered open or not as a function of inferred hardness, so to speak, from like the aggregate difficulty and the number of blocks mined, in addition to whatever the fees are kind of as a looking forwards, as in what is in the mempool versus what is in recent history. Because if you ever find yourself in a situation where there are more fees to be earned by reorging the last block than there are in the mempool now, you're gonna try to reorg the last block, right? If you're economically rational at all. And that's not even necessarily a bad thing, right? Like reorging one block happens, multiple times a month in Bitcoin. It's just usually by accident due to block propagation times. It's not usually intentional for economic reasons. And as a result, like we're used to those things happening. What we're really scared of is deep reorgs. And insofar as, we kind of expect some of these shallow reorgs and like we can get to a point where we're not where we've engineered these things such that we can be very sure that reorgs won't happen beyond a certain depth, even if the depth at which they are nominally going to happen is sort of dynamic. But as long as anybody can infer that at any given time, it means that, we have a good idea of what is and is not safe, which is, I think, all we need.
I think by time the transactions outweigh the subsidies, or yeah, all right, that's a good way of wording it. By the time the transactions outweigh the subsidies, you're talking so far down the line that there's going to be so much hash rate online that I think even a shallow reorg might be, like even a 2-3 block reorg might not be feasible.
It's going to be an interesting dynamic as like miners like flip on during high mempool times, because as channel maintainers or as routing node operators, you're taking a fundamentally long position on the mempool, based on the time that you actually started this channel. Because if you're able to establish a channel when your costs are low, meaning your transaction fees are low, then you're able to like amortize that cost and charge a higher routing fee rate when the mempool fees go up, because the alternative is an on-chain transaction versus using someone else's channel to make a transaction happen.
I will say that that effect is not strictly linear though, because they're two different markets happening, right? Most Lightning Network fees are dominated by PPM, which is a function of how much value is being transacted, whereas chain fees are a function of block space, which is how much you know chain space information that you're gonna take up.
That's true. Yeah. It I guess the other aspect is how stable are your channels, because if you're able to like amortize this over a long time and you're not worried about an occasional force close happening, then you would be able to charge a lower fee, but there's also a cost of capital involved. Like, so you're gonna create a larger channel from the get-go and hope that it lasts as long as possible, and that your traffic on that channel will come in two directions. But in the end, like you do want to take kind of a long position on the mempool, because you imagine that more transactions are going to happen, and then you would be able to charge more for maybe these certainly these smaller transactions first, but then as the mempool gets more congested, you're going to want a larger and larger channel so that you can capture those larger transactions that might want to happen during high mempool times and charge a lot.
I'm going to advance the position here, and I think this might be, I don't know if it's controversial, but I don't know that a lot of people have this opinion right now. I don't think that ping pong routing nodes are going to exist for very long. I think that they fundamentally sit in an unstable position in the network architecture, because if you are consistently able to route from A to B and from B to A, it means that A and B have an incentive to set up a direct channel with each other, and someone eventually will discover that. I think in the end, almost all routers are going to end up being essentially liquidity speculators, where they pull, where they're actually always having to rebalance their channels. Because any situation where they are not having to rebalance their channels, they're likely to get cut out as a middleman. And what the service that they're fundamentally providing when they are rebalancing channels is that they're trading reliability for a fee. So they're picking up and aggregating liquidity from places in the network using their own, computational resources and lowered time preference in order to be able to serve that up to users who need that liquidity on demand.
Yeah, it is speculation, because you're speculating on how to allocate your limited amount of sats to various directions on the Lightning Network. Whom do I connect to, and how active are they? And you're also looking at like, well, am I missing out on these other transaction fees that might be happening elsewhere in the network? As well as like where are you in the network? How central are you to this network? So how much traffic could you actually capture? And fundamentally, I don't believe that rebalancing is really going to fix any of these issues. I think having bidirectional channels is a pretty poor assumption, because yeah, I think traffic is going to flow from A to B and not from B to A necessarily. For example, like a retail store, I mean, they're going to be taking in funds of far more than they're going to be offering refunds. So that cash box that they have is always going to be filling up, and they're going to be selling goods, and that's just what commerce looks like. And so we're going to watch more commerce come online on the Lightning Network. So we're we're going to have an increased like directionality in our channels. Like it will really flow one direction and not the other, and you won't be able to fix that with circular rebalancing.
No, circular rebalancing, all it does is if there are not spare channels in the network, or sort of what I would describe as like lower quality liquidity providers in the network, you're right. You can't actually circularly rebalance anything, because it just won't, unless you can find what are fundamentally circular routes within the economy themselves, and you can find a way to get the actors themselves to pay for it. But I think in the presence of what I would describe as lower quality routing nodes, what you can do with circular rebalancing is, like I said, you're trading the time preference of the payment. So you're saying, okay, like, hey, I can sort of scrap together liquidity from a bunch of these different lower quality nodes and pull it all into my channels, such that, you know, when that demand comes, it's able to reliably go over mine, and like, you know, people will consistently use your channels instead of others. But yeah, like if those don't exist, you can't use the circular rebalances to scrap together that liquidity. And so like, yeah, it really depends on how the network architecture unfolds, and whether or not the sort of just the computational requirements of being able to have those lower quality nodes in the network at all is going to end up being viable at scale.
I think that's a great point, because yeah, we will be looking at reliability, because once you have all this commerce happening, they're going to expect that they're going to have transaction finality in a like nearly instantaneous. So we want the fast transactions that the Lightning Network can offer, and so you as a routing node are simply providing reliability on being able to do that. So these liquidity problems that you're going to have, uh, like you're going to need to solve those in order to be a reliable routing node that is trusted by the businesses that are going to rely on your services.
Yeah, I mean, like that, I fully agree with everything you just said.
Awesome. Let's see. What else is on the docket, Evan? I feel like we got
yeah, we got a whole bunch queued up so far. Let's see. Take a look at our list. Oh,
we
I
have
think we had a bit of a new segment we wanted to add, sort of educational topic of the week, I guess. In CLTV deltas. Do you want to get into that?
that was what I listed as a question. What is the CLTV delta? And that's something that users can specify. And what does it mean for Lightning Network operators and routers? Maybe we could get someone up with a little bit more expertise on that.
So the way that I think about that as a router is a trade-off between how long it takes in the worst case to kill an HTLC. So basically, what is the worst case scenario for how long my funds are going to be locked up? In exchange for, it gives me more time to react to dishonest counterparties.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of looking at it. It also is important for people who are using light nodes. Like, let's say they're running like a node off their phone. It's like the amount of time you have to sign back in and keep the plate spinning before the channel automatically expires and closes out.
So what would a low CLTV delta setting mean, and what would a high CLTV delta mean, and what would be low and high, just as a frame of reference?
I don't really know how to reason about what is too low or too high, but if it's really low, what you end up having is a situation where you don't have a lot of time to react to a counterparty trying to cheat you. Like if you, let's say, I mean, the default in LND, at least, I think probably even in the protocol, though I'm not as well read on some of the protocol defaults themselves, is that it's about 40 blocks, and that gives you about, that means that the difference between the HTLCs that come in versus the ones that go out is 40 blocks, which gives you about 40 blocks to try to react to any sort of, I guess, funny business by your counterparties, which is a fair amount of time, right? Like at approximately 6 blocks an hour, you're talking about like an 8-hour reaction time. And I think anybody who would consider themselves a professional in the routing space is not going to have 8 hours of downtime. So it's not a huge deal to try to make that smaller. But in exchange, it means that you can have up to 40 blocks where an HTLC sits unresolved, and as a result, that's kind of dead weight capital that's not really able to work for you.
So when you talk about like funds kind of being locked up in a way, are you talking about a forced close period where you wouldn't be able to get your funds back, or is this purely in a routing sense that, say, you're paying Evan and it's going through me, and so you've started that payment over to me, but then suddenly I've gone offline, and so now I've got this pending HTLC that I haven't really responded to, and I'm not able to route that.
Yeah, I think, and okay, so this is where I'm not quite sure on the 100% of the details, but I think the way that this happens is that if you go offline in that scenario, I have to wait the duration of the HTLC, I have to wait the duration of the CLTV delta before I can try to reclaim uh, the HTLC construction, because at the end of the day, these are Bitcoin transactions that have scripts associated with them that are happening under the hood. Maybe Nifty can talk more about this since she's kind of deep in the protocol.
Hey y'all. This is, I'm gonna be honest, like thinking about routing isn't something I've spent like a lot of time on. So like the CLTV and the CLTV expiry delta stuff is like totally like 100% like a routing concern. But I did want to point out that there's an incredible essay that covers kind of like all the different things you'd want to think about when you're trying to set the CLTV delta in the spec. It's in the second one. There's a whole section called CLTV expiry delta selection. That's like the name of kind of like basically like a mini blog post embedded inside of the spec. And it goes through like all the different like scenarios and why. Basically it kind of like breaks it into like how do you figure out like what the best number is, and it kind of looks at like three different sort of variables. Worst case scenario of a reorganization depth. So what happens if the chain gets reorganized, and how many how many blocks that reorg is. And they call that like R. The second thing that they look at is something that's called like a grace period. So how long after an HTLC timeout should you wait? How many blocks should you wait before you give up on an unresponsive peer and you drop it to chain? And then the third thing that they use, like the third variable that they kind of use to um, what do you call, determine what the expiry should be, is the number of blocks between when a transaction is broadcast and how long until that transaction actually gets included in a block. And so in this blog post or like section of the spec, basically they call that S. So you have three variables. You have R, which is like what happened, like how many blocks of a reorg do you kind of want to have space for, G, which is how many blocks do you want to have space for if like your peer times out and disappears. And so like the HTLC is timed out. And so how much time do you want to give them before you like have to actually go to chain with it? And then S, which is how long between when you broadcast a transaction, you can expect it to get included in a block. And so you basically like what they've done in the spec is they've like chosen kind of the kind of norm, like a range for each of those, and then add them up. And they're like, okay, so like the kind of the minimum one is maybe like, so like 30, so like they've come up with like 34 is a reasonable number. That's with like the reorg being 2, the grace period being 2, and then like the amount of time to get a transaction into a block being 12. So you should set like, you could set your delta at 34. Or let's see, yeah, anyways, but I should post it. It's like a really good, I think it's a really interesting section, and it like covers basically everything that like at least the implementers thought about when they were designing it. I think the minimum one they say for like terminal payments, that's like if you're at the end of it, the worst case is like 18 total. And that's the default that we give in like invoices, so matches the stuff. Anyways.
So, from what I understand, it has setting this CLTV expiry delta. It does have routing implications. Is this something that is like public from the Gossip Network, or is this something that you might want to know before connecting to a certain peer on what this setting of theirs is?
Yeah, so I know it's definitely public, and I think that you said it in your channel update, but I'd have to go back. Maybe I can check that really fast.
Yeah, it is a per channel setting.
Yeah, it's a per channel setting, and we use it when you're calculating the route, like based on what that HTLV delta is. That affects the how expensive you consider a route to be, at least in C Lightning. So like when you're calculating how expensive a route is, part of the calculation that C Lightning does when they're picking like what the most expensive route is, part of it is the channel fee that they're charging, and the other part is the total like amount of time that your funds might end up getting locked in that attempt. And so that actually adds into like the expected cost of that route. Again, like I said, I haven't done like a whole lot with our routing stuff, so I'm not entirely sure exactly what the parameters are there. But at least for C Lightning, like yeah, that gets added as a cost of that channel for anyone who's using it.
Yeah. Hey, if I understand it correctly, the total CLTV count of the whole circuit is also included, right? So there is a maximum limit on the total CLTV count across your complete payment circuit that you can have on your route. That's also one of the implications, right? When you're constructing a route, like each channel which is involved in the route, the CLTV value is added to come up with the maximum limit. And there is a maximum limit that it cannot exceed. I think that is also one of the factors, which I think if I understood it correctly.
So when we're looking at payments to route, you don't want that CLTV delta to be too high, because it might mean that if you use this route, your funds could be locked up for a significant period of time, and it would kind of excuse these different intermediary hops for being offline for a period of time. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
This is fascinating. So then, by like on the other side of that coin, if your CLTV delta is too low, then you might be subject to some of those block reorg issues. Is that right?
Well, consider this scenario, right? If it's really, really low, it that affects the time between when your peer pulls, if you're an intermediate node and your downstream, as in closer to the recipient peer, tries to pull the payment by revealing the hash pre-image, and you don't turn around and reveal that to your upstream peer fast enough, then the HTLC collapses on the time value, right? And so you may be out the money as a router in that scenario. Now you have to be down for a period of time in order for this to happen, but that's part of it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So seems like some pretty big implications from setting that. I hope we were able to shed a little bit more light on that topic, because it is one of those features that routing nodes are able to set. And we've got a whole bunch of new folks coming onto the Lightning Network, so it's good to clarify those things. Thanks.
Yeah, and so if anyone wants to look at what the spec says and like kind of what the spec implementers had to say about how to think about it, I just tweeted it out. I don't know how to like share it in a space. But if anyone wants to take some more time and look at it and maybe write up like a better interpretation of it than I've been able to give here today, that would be really awesome.
What else we got on the list, Evan?
All right. Next topic. We talked about it just a little bit, but we're seeing a massive capacity increase on the network. I think we are up to about 1,700 BTC on the Lightning Network. And of course, this is only the public capacity. So I'm not sure how much we have to say about that, but it is awesome. Other big events coming up that probably bump that capacity up. Number one in my mind is September 7th, El Salvador. They're going to do their airdrop to their citizens. I believe it's something like $30 worth of Satoshis going to everyone's Chivo wallet. And yeah, it's going to be like a KYC heavily wallet run by the government. It's got a lot of different implications on that level, but it seems like we should be seeing another 10 to $15 million worth coming onto the network then. So that'll be exciting. I'm sure that'll actually get onboarded before then. But I think we're going to continue to see this trend of our capacity inching upwards. So yes, as far as adoption, this is the number one figure we want to see. As far as graphs going up and to the right, Lightning Network capacity and adoption is paramount. So really exciting to see that. Anyone had any comments on that?
So where do you go to look at this Lightning capacity increase?
So I think the stats themselves are actually part of the fundamental channel graph, but the increase, like the historical data, I actually just pull it from 1ML, and the sort of, if you go to 1ml.com, no sort of route after that, it'll like show these little sort of percent increases or decreases, and it's on the month is how those are quoted.
Fantastic. One thing that we've been noticing is that every node has a different view of the network graph, and that's been something that we've been working through with Amboss. Is that if we're starting up this new company and it has a node, it really can't see everything on the network, and so we're always we're struggling with that to make sure that we can actually see all these different nodes as a Lightning Network Explorer.
So what are your thoughts for like solutions around that? You guys are going to set up multiple nodes, maybe have some in stealth, compare your node and Tony's node. Like it's sort of tricky with the graph and how that works as a peer-to-peer gossip network, huh?
Yeah, we've let's see, we're working with Voltage right now to do a cloud hosted node, so we don't have to provide that hardware ourselves, but it is a new node, and one thing that we've looked at is having like pinned peers, so we could always ask certain peers on the network, well, what does your graph look like, and can you tell me all of your peers, that type of stuff, just to get access to that, to their subgraph, I guess.
Wait, but isn't that just a gossip issue? Like it sounds like, I mean, so when you say like that different nodes don't have the same view of the routing node network, that basically like another way you could state that is like nodes have different gossip sets. And that seems like, I mean, that's kind of a problem, right? Like um I don't know why that would be like again gossip is also not my like strong suit in terms of knowing exactly how sea lightning stuff works, but if your node isn't getting it has a different view of gossip, like at some point eventually like the gossip should be the same across or like roughly the same across the whole network, right?
Yeah, it's eventually consistent in terms of those static properties, but I at least in my mind, when I say that different nodes have different views of the network, I mean from like a purely economic standpoint. Like people, like a lot of people talk about like the BOS score or like the Lightning terminal engineering or terminal.lightning.engineering and those scores and things, and those probes are taken from a very particular vantage point along the network, and so the nodes will have different views on the network precisely because they have different information about what payments and probes they've tried succeeding and failing, and that is distinctly not part of the gossip, and never, or at least as in my understanding, never will be because it becomes intractable to do so.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about like if you're probing the network, any data that you get via probes is a function of your nodes, like channels and connections and like position and relation to other nodes in the network. That makes a lot of sense to me. Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right about a lot of this is kind of gossip about at least how many nodes are on the network, and yeah, we notice big differences in, just from like my SAT-based node, that like I can see about 1,000 more nodes than we can than we see on other smaller nodes with fewer channels. And I also see several thousand more channels than some of these maybe older nodes that are smaller.
The other one that I'm actually not sure about, and this I'd like to solicit some of your guys' opinions, is that the other way that you can get a different view of the channel graph than someone else, and that isn't a strict failure of the gossip network, is leaking private channels over time. As you start to get routing hints through invoices, it's not like those channels necessarily go away, and you can add them to your channel graph. Now, I don't know what the default behavior on whether private channels will route or not uh, by the nodes that offer them. But if you have a different view of where the private channels are in the network, then you can get different network graphs fundamentally in that way. And I guess you can say that
I think I missed that last little bit, but let's see. I did hear something this week about zombie channels and what qualifies as a zombie channel. So you're telling me that if you receive a routing hint about a private channel, now you know of that channel's existence, and uh, so would you continue to receive updates, or would it become a zombie channel after a certain period of time of not hearing an update from that channel?
well, you're not going to get updates on the channel at all because it's not part of the public graph, but you know it exists because I mean like the the way that routing hints work, at least I haven't dived deep into this, but I believe it's like the short channel IDs embedded in the Bolt 11 invoices, which means you can go look up that transaction in the block history and know roughly how big it is, and correspondingly, you know when that UTXO gets spent. So you know the lifetime of at least the UTXO. Now, you can't necessarily know if that channel will route or what the routing fees on that channel are. But you know of its existence and you know when it closes, but you only figure that out when someone's told you of its existence, because you can't necessarily infer that a particular UTXO is a channel point or not just from looking at it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? We've got now we've got a full set of knowledgeable speakers.
Well, I don't know much about Lightning, but I was pretty interested in the mining conversation that was going on while Adam and Dennis were here. I've been interested in the developments in small modular reactor technology and the way that it's going to be deployed for remote communities that could greatly benefit from this technology being combined with the new energy technology that's going to be coming out with nuclear reactors. If anybody's interested in that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think those two hopped off. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I wish, like, this is a thing that, I mean, I'm excited about and interested in, but I cannot even pretend to know a lot about it.
I know, that's why I was hoping to talk to a few of the guys that were into the mining more deeply and seeing what sort of opportunities they could.
Yeah, I wish we could have got you on a little earlier when those guys were on, but I think we're having some technical difficulties and the timing didn't work out. But yeah, hopefully we could try to facilitate that maybe next week or sometime in the future for sure.
But either way, I'm hanging around in these spaces just trying to generate more interest in the idea, because normally when when energy talk comes up, there's lots of interest in the flared gas and the way that miners are taking advantage of that and starting to get more into hydroelectric generation technology. But within about 5 years or so, we're hoping to start in Canada firing up a few uh, demonstration small modular reactors. There will be of varying sizes. It will be for different applications for remote communities and remote mineral extraction operations. That could definitely take advantage of Bitcoin mining as a side gig in all of this to help further build out infrastructure and community projects.
It sounds pretty exciting. I was just reading Lynn Alden's piece on like the oil and gas and energy in general, and nuclear was part of that, and just kind of like forecasting how the energy makeup, might change based on people's time preference about and how immediate their needs are for energy, where they might go to biomass or coal if the energy needs are immediate, or they might pursue some of the slower, less with less like impacts outside of let's see, less negative externalities, where they might choose that, where it's and with a little mempool weather report.
Well, like, one of the things that I think is the most interesting sort of synergy between just normal energy systems and mining in general is like, and a question I have about these sort of nuclear reactors that you're talking about is that one of the problems with the generators for like fossil fuels is that they're Because if it was, then when the energy demand goes away, then you kind of have to curtail a bunch of energy as a result, because you can't afford to turn the thing off and then turn it back on again when the energy demand goes back up. And so Bitcoin mining gives you an opportunity to still at least offset the cost of keeping the things running, and potentially even profit from it. And so my question is like whether or not nuclear reactors suffer from the same problems.
Most of the older generation designs definitely suffer from that efficiency problem where it's just better for them to run full tilt rather than going up and down to follow the base load. But then that does require a lot of curtailment of that energy between the base load and the max capacity that they run most efficiently at. And that's one of the angles that I'm presenting my idea from, is that the Bitcoin mining fills that gap. And it's just an opportunity to generate revenue from energy that otherwise would have been wasted. One of the big examples that I see an opportunity for that's already part of the SMR deployment is that they want to use them for remote mining and mineral extraction programs. So if they were to set up a 50 megawatt reactor in a remote location where they intend to mine, they can, by including Bitcoin mining into it, they can start generating revenue long before they even start creating the physical conventional mine, and they can, and then as more energy is directed in towards the conventional mining operation, they can scale down the Bitcoin mining, and then they can also do the same on the back end as the mine scales down in operations in whatever 20, 30 years, however long the facility operates for. And then the modular function of the reactors and the Bitcoin mining make them both easy to just pack up and move.
Yeah, I guess also like it means that maybe this is what you said, although you were a little bit muffled, but you can still earn money before you've built out transportation and storage, as long as you can just have the energy production online.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the cases of communities where these things get deployed to, you can use the Bitcoin mining before you have the transmission and the grid capabilities installed. So the Bitcoin mining could easily subsidize operation costs like that always seem to be a problem with a lot of these renewable sources that get built in remote locations that are far away from the actual points of use. And then the investment doesn't get fully made because nobody considers the transmission into the equation. But by having a source of revenue right at the point of generation, it further facilitates being able to connect grids and develop the sophisticated network of microgrids.
I do have to say, one of the greatest ironies and sort of like I don't know, it feels like vindication, is that like the mainstream, and I think the irony is that it's going to turn around and actually like revolutionize energy markets altogether, and it fix many of the problems that it's actually that the mainstream media has actually attributed to Bitcoin.
It does solve a lot of things. And yeah, my goal right now is to create enough awareness in the idea so that the moment that the first demonstration reactors start getting built in Canada, so the moment that they start generating electricity, they are also generating revenue through Bitcoin mining. And they can choose to do it however they want. Like they can either choose to contract Bitcoin miners that are already like competent and have a built up infrastructure in what they do, like guys like the upstream data, like where they just pull up a CCAN full of miners, or the stuff that Greg Foss is getting into with his fancy jet turbines, and they can basically apply Canada, start rolling out a new fleet of small modular reactors. And then once we can reduce the capital costs of these things, we can start deploying them faster. And the only things that will really limit us is how fast they can be manufactured. And then we'll have to keep up with fuel, so that's going to be a lot of interesting things because there's uranium and thorium, and some of these reactors will be able to process waste plutonium. And there's a lot of interesting potential that this can go that I can't even conceive of right now, and I've been thinking about this idea a lot lately.
Cool. Just so you know, your signal's also breaking up.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for giving us a heads up about that new energy source. If I may pivot us a little bit back, Evan brought up an onion messaging protocol that I thought might be interesting to hear a little bit more about. Evan, you want to introduce that one?
Yeah, sure thing. So this came on my radar the last couple of days. Maybe it was yesterday. But I believe it's a proposal that Rusty Russell over at Sea Lightning and Blockstream brought up, where we could potentially have on the protocol, a layer for onion message routing. So right now you can pass messages on the Lightning Network, but you have to do so with either payments or failed payments. And this would get rid of the need to have to pay for them, and you'd be able to just exchange messages freely on the network. So this has led to some very interesting discussion about the state of messaging on the Lightning Network right now, the trade-offs between having that cost to like make a payment, and how that acts as a mechanism to deter spam versus other methods you could potentially do of just put in rate limiting. It's really interesting. Let me see if I could pull up Rusty's proposal and get into the weeds of it. But yeah, obviously people are really interested in other uses of the Lightning Network beyond just payments, and messaging has proven to be a really interesting use case that's not sort of ossified yet. People are taking some different approaches with their messengers, but we've seen messengers that can send messages over the Lightning Network. So the most popular right now is Sphinx. Sphinx app is really cool in that it's got groups, it's got one-on-one messages, and they've also got this mechanism for streaming sats, and they get like a chunk of the show, and then you could program what percentage of your stream goes to like a producer or someone doing promotion. So that's an interesting implementation. There's also the what was the other desktop app? Juggernaut is the other desktop implementation. I think that's LND only. Rusty has a Bolt proposal for what this would look like, and let's see if I can pull it up. Yeah, it's on the Lightning RFC GitHub, and I believe the feature number has just been bumped up. Yeah, it's Bolt 7, one-way messaging with no error returns. So yeah, very interesting concept. I was wondering what you all thought of this and how you guys lean on the issue of having all sorts of data versus using what's essentially the payment request layer to
So with these like existing implementations, we've got Sphinx and Juggernaut, which you mentioned, but we've also got just you can send and receive messages, but with each one comes a payment of some amount of sats to actually route that payment across the network and go through any hops that it might encounter.
Yeah, so like right now you can abuse the error message or the fact that you don't pay for failed payments in any way, shape, or form to sort of that because people can already do this in an expensive way, doing it in a cheaper way is better. The argument are, I just have been made aware of the two sides.
Yeah, I do remember. I remember him talking about emails in general. That initially it started with that you could. They were trying to come up with a way to like filter out a whole bunch of like spam emails, and like, oh well, it actually now with Sats you of those messages, so you don't, so your inbox doesn't get filled with spam, and you could actually like economically choose which messages you want to receive and which ones you want to read. Do some message filtering so people could send in all sorts of garbage that you might not, your node might not want to receive.
Yeah, I'll also merging or even the sort of failed payments mechanism. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really keen on the idea of messaging on the Lightning Network. It's something I definitely want to bring to Zeus once things are more mature. I really think it's awesome, the idea of having a messaging protocol that is decentralized. We're not depending on any centralized choke points. I think this became really abundantly important to me once Signal got their discussion go on about adding their mobile coin, which is like a shit coin in so many of the worst ways, and how it's engineered. So it's always been intriguing to me. I think the spam factor is like a really big part of it to me. I don't want spam to be like clogging up the network. And it would be really nice to have this deterrence. I mean, in a lot of parts of the Lightning Network, where it comes to like getting liquidity and other aspects, like I really like the idea of being able to use the SAT as like an economic incentive to drive behavior. So in that regard, I really do like the idea that you can deter spam or, make a spammer pay, a couple thousand satoshis to even message you in the first place. That would certainly be nice if you're, for example, like you had, your email spam. If someone had to pay you tons of several dollars for each spam message you got, certainly you would be getting less spam in your inbox. So
But you're saying this primarily from like a human perspective and not from like a computer perspective, because at the end of the day,
I'm talking entirely from a user experience. Envision how things would work without that incentive in line.
the concern I have, just generally speaking, is that, like I said, Lightning itself relies on an underlying transfer, like a message transfer mechanism. Like you can't have, actually, hell, every system that you're using to deter spam is built upon something that you're trying to solve spam for. Like you have this sort of for ones that have not paid the sufficient, Lightning protocol itself at that point, right? You're just talking about messages that have or have not been accompanied by payments.
Because like we've become so accustomed to like having free services. For example, Google, we get to enjoy for example, our information or knowledge about what sort of advertisements might be exchange return, which is a pretty expensive way to broadcast a message. The cost would be even lower to like one sat. And I'm curious what's the opposing force so that we're not providing services for free to the entire world or the entire network.
So general consensus is that like there's nothing that there's nothing that makes your node for to like use the heuristic for who to forward messages to and who not is whether or not you have a channel for them. So if you've opened a channel, that means that to some extent they have capital committed fine. Yeah, the other thing I kind of wanted to point out is that like I think Justifer was talking about how like messaging on Bitcoin is done through op return. Network is via like the transactions themselves, like don't even like getting into chain, but just like clogging up the network. network.
Who are receiving these onion messages from, it can't be like relayed through several other hops before it gets to you?
So that's not that you would like suggest that you do is that you could only send like onion messages via a channel node, via other nodes you have an existing channel with. Yeah, so it's not like I said, like I don't think you'll see any of it if you go through and like read the onion message spec. It won't be in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely very interesting, and we'll have to see how that shakes out. I wonder if I was thinking like it would be funny another spam prevention mechanism was to bring it back and make senders do some proof of work, which is sort of what proof of work was initially made for like preventing spam on email, which was pretty brilliant.
Yeah, and this was actually still like a while ago. I can't remember griefing, which is like someone sends you an HTLC, basically like a failed payment, right? Like sends an HTLC that then like takes up your channel liquidity, right? Gets locked into like all these HTLCs, and then there's no like so bad. It's like right now you can do the same thing with a failed payment, and failed payments are so much worse in terms of locking up liquidity for a period of time than like these little lightweight onion messages would. Like old mailing list point, by like old I think like a year or two ago, of like basically people trying to come up with a way to like make payments have a cost even if they do fail. And I think there were things like, oh well, you have to like pre-compute hashes, and so when you send your payment through it has to have like some hashes that prove that you like did some work to send it. I don't remember exactly like how that ended up, or like where that's definitely a thing.
My gut instinct is saying that it's begging the question, right? Like it seems like if to require a payment to even attempt to send
That's I really like that point. Or like just by the fact that we're involving money in a message relay, is to become spec, does that mean that it's on by default, that you would have to participate, or would each node be able to like say like, oh well, we're going to implement these forward? Lost Nifty.
Oh no. Yeah, that's a really good question. Would this system be opt-in? Hopefully, right? I don't think the spec mentioned anything about that.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, everything in Lightning and in Bitcoin is opt-in. Like, it's really a question of whether or not the day it's like you don't have to forward shit if you don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, hell, you could system. That's the way Lightning works. I mean, it's the great difference for. Whereas with Lightning, you can sort of do these different operations however on the other side of it, it's like you could potentially have things that are inoperable, like between LND or C Lightning or one of the big headaches that these Lightning protocol devs are having, like when they're bashing heads on what's the best way to do. Same time, you can just like say, "Oh, okay, we did this," and all of a sudden, all your clients have this functionality. When one of the challenges and differences of developing protocol on LN.
Right. I mean, like, so unlike Bitcoin, which is a consensus between you and your direct peer, right? Every channel are somewhat isolated.
Yeah, absolutely. It will really only just affect the status of your channel, right?
We reach our 2 hours. I saw you added Sam Korn as a speaker.
Sam Korn.
Like encryption keys over the Lightning Network, and then creating an out-of-band data connection between the two networks, or between the two nodes that way. So
Fortunately, it's in my podcast queue. But the Impervious AI products sound have these actors offer up services like that. So something we're definitely keeping a close eye on, but admittedly, I have not listened to.
some way to make an encrypted channel between two people, and then you do most of the communication.
You have the initiation happen on LN, and you force that initialization to happen and charge for it, right? So you don't have spam where you.
It'd be a cool file sharing protocol or something like that. You ask for a piece of data, and then you send the one-time use key just to send that data over.
of being able to pay for peers or access to files is definitely intriguing. So if we could facilitate that. Entirely with economic incentives where you're paying a couple of sats or hundreds sats, thousand sats to get this line.
Alex Bosworth has mentioned charging people to get access to the old. Payments for some of these old blocks.
I mean, do we really need that? I mean, in the context like that makes sense, but I don't really see that making sense at all in the context of the project we know as Bitcoin.
Increases. It's precisely why we've, as a sort of community, we've been adamantly against block size increases. But adopt that sort of technology. And so, insofar as that's true, we have to cope with history that's growing unbounded. Now, the hope is that we will have exponential today. And having one person have a single UTXO there are significant scaling problems even with Lightning. Like, we're not anywhere close to done if we're trying to get Bitcoin to scale to global sound money. Like,
Yeah, agree.
And here's the thing: any sufficiently powerful technology, of which Bitcoin is one, if it's not widely distributed, can become still shooting for trying to get it to scale for individuals, lest they lose the censorship and seizure resistant properties.
those. That's what's important. And the challenge is keeping that cost low enough while maintaining the decentralization.
Now they're this pristine asset that they have access to, then they can start growing their knowledge and learning how to become more self-sovereign with that. And I wrote a guide on batch channel opens. You can buy it on satbase.org. But I wrote up and one of those is broadcasting that batch channel open for you, and that will save a bit on the
maximum with what the network parameters are now. So without block size increases, without extension blocks, without anything like that. Longer, between 1.5 and 2 years to get everyone in America to open up a single channel. And that's just America. America's a comparatively small
a non-custodial solution like running their own node and things like that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it
I'm
was
not
more
trying
just
to.
yeah. Yeah, I think it was more just like, you know, to the comments, like we say, and
Bitcoin's fucked. We can't do this, right? I only bring them up because it's necessary for us to be able to talk about them so that we can fix them. Because at the end of the day, some form or another, and it's better if they can use it with all of Bitcoin's imbued properties, such as censorship and seizure resistance, and stuff like that. And so, like, we can't.
In the Bitcoin space versus, you know, a lot of the shitcoins that are around. It's that like no one who is deeply
genuinely good idea. Like Bitcoin should make an attempt to steal that. And people, one of the things that kind of upsets me about the way that I see some of the discourse go is
not that, but I just think we can go for extra credit and like get Lightning Network and someday get multi-party channels and all these things that will kind of make it even harder.
opportunity to do so. Except sidechains, unlike Lightning, do offer the opportunity to scale users as opposed to just transactions. And so
stake to be stolen or lost. So I think as a community, if we want to see drive chains come to fruition, I think everyone who listened and everyone who's promoting Lightning Friday. Remember, we do this every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be here. We try to do about 2 hours. We extended it